Hello, everyone. Before we begin, I want to just briefly acknowledge the global health crisis we're all going through right now. I hope that you and your families are all doing okay. We're all in this together. Thanks for joining us today. If there is anything we can do to help you out personally or professionally, please feel free to reach out to us. Now let's do this. I hope everyone's kids are in front of an iPad. Let's pray Netflix doesn't crash. In case you're wondering, this is food coloring. I've done at least 10,000 baking soda and vinegar volcanoes this week. My daughters are a lot better behaved when the volcano is colorful. Trust me on this one. Now, I've met and spoken with most of you who are joining today, but for those new friends, I'm Isaac Brown. I lead the industrial tech practice here at Landmark Ventures. We are going to have a dynamic discussion today featuring a couple friends of mine from GE and Nestle. In a minute, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. We'll have the main panel for about 15 minutes, and then after that, we'll have a 15-minute Q&A session. Audience members can submit questions via the Q&A tab, and then I can tag you in to ask your question. We'll finish up at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Now, without further ado, let's do some brief introductions and then get into the debate. Goran, why don't you go first? Can you just quickly introduce yourself?
Me go first?
Yeah, you go first.
Hi, my name's Goran Kukic. I'm Chief Technology Information Officer for Nestle. I've been with the company for last 18 years, and currently I'm confined in San Francisco, where I lead the team that looks into what's the outside innovation and try to bring the outside innovation into the Nestle.
Excellent. Thanks, Goran. Magnus, quick intro from you, and then let's jump into it.
Hello, all. I'm Magnus Akesson. I lead IT and operations technology for a manufacturing division within GE, GE Gas Power. We design and build gas turbines and power plant equipment for the world. And I'm enjoying working from home here in my home office in Richmond, Virginia.
Great, thanks guys. Two very important businesses right now, food and power. So happy to have you guys here and really appreciate your time. So let's jump into the big picture question here. About just the scale of rollouts of industrial technologies within your operations. So, over the past 5 years, the cost of sensors has dropped. Connectivity has become ubiquitous. The availability of cloud and machine learning tools has increased drastically. Why are digital technologies, not being rolled out at scale across industrial enterprises? Who wants to jump on that one?
If you don't mind, Isaac, I'll start. Just to bring home the point of what you said, I actually brought one of my toys here. I don't know if those of you are looking at the camera can probably look at this little guy here. It's a little microcontroller. It's an Arduino. There's, it's a development board, but there's industrial scale versions of this. It's about $30. It comes with 9 sensors, barometric pressure, temperature. It's got a little tiny ML engine on here. You can deploy tiny machine learning models on here. For example, you code it in C++ with C++. And it comes with multiple connectivity options, like you said, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi. You can even do some zero-G stuff and some really cool stuff. And it's $40. And there's some amazing things and some amazing outcomes we can achieve with these radically improved technology. And by the way, I failed to mention, I can connect this thing securely to the cloud. I can manage it at scale in the cloud. I can update the firmware from the cloud, and I can deploy these things at scale for a very, very low cost. So innovation, and this kind of stuff, it doesn't cost money. It costs your time. And so the big conundrum then is that why aren't we just adapting these technologies at the pace at which technology is now allowing us to? And I struggle with that, I had to tell you, day in and day out. But I come to think of two main themes. One is that at least in manufacturing, we're still old school operations people. We worry about quality, safety, productivity, cost, getting product out the door on time. And I think in general, myself and many others, we have failed to really bridge the gap between how we can apply these technologies to really affect those outcomes. which leads me to the second thing of, a lot of people, like it holds true for all of us, you can't see what you don't know. And I still see this tremendous skill gap in all functions, in IT, in manufacturing, engineering, in quality, where, we just don't have, we haven't learned yet what's the art of the possible out there. And when you can't see it and don't know it, it's really hard to adapt it and bring that, and bridge that gap to these, to these metrics don't fundamentally change. So I think it's a giant talent gap, skill gap, and just awareness and culture that we still have a huge, long way to go here.
Okay.
Well, if I may, Isaac, what I would add to that is there's a common understanding today that enterprises are working more and more with startups, and there's a common understanding that enterprises are today more open as they're figuring out their enterprise innovation models. So I think that we are in a better situation than we were a couple of years ago. The big difference between doing innovation in the enterprise space and doing innovation in the consumer space is the criticality of the operations. So we have all embarked on the journey of DevOps, and in the consumer space, looking at what are the giants like Facebook and Google doing, and notion that any developer can take 10,000 users, spin them off in a testing environment, do a quick A and B test, and realize something's working well, and say, oh, this is great, why don't we deploy this across the entire asset, became a new norm, a new normal in the consumer space. You can't do that in the enterprise space. You can't say, oh, I'm gonna just the factories are all chasing their intensity. They're all chasing to reach their numbers, and they all want to get as high throughput as they can. So testing and POCs in the enterprise environment are significantly more difficult than in the rest of the innovation space.
Okay, interesting. So Magnus, from you, a big skill gap and a couple other factors, and Goran, just the testing environments are very different. I like those answers. So, another obstacle I think is the way that technology vendors try and sell things into industrial operations. I think their business models are not necessarily aligned with the way that operators like to buy. What's the right business model for a digital industrial technology vendor?
I mean, let me try this one first. The answer is I don't know. I mean, again, the issue that you have in the manufacturing and enterprise space is the capex intensity. You build the factories for years to come. How much investment and how much capex can you assign to the factory and to bring in new capabilities, especially if you're not sure if they're going to work or not? It's a challenge. When you have a company one factory, two factories, you're talking about a lot. And in Nestle case, that would be 433, I believe. But you don't talk about, oh, I'm going to fix one. You right away start thinking about the bigger picture, and that bigger picture brings you always to scary capex numbers. So what's the right model? I don't know. Maybe the right model is then, well, maybe I can lease the equipment, maybe I can pay per throughput, whatever, but no large manufacturer likes that notion. That's why we own our own factories as much as we can. So I don't know.
I'll give it a go, guys. I see opposing forces here. Every manufacturer of hardware in the world is still facing with the same sort of strategic roadmap or challenge of how do I move from a provider of hardware to one that is more, a provider of digital services, and eventually, a lot of companies thinking about how do we start selling outcomes. And that holds true for all of us. Like in GE, we do that with aircraft engines, for example. We sell, engines by the flight hour, for example. So every industrial manufacturer is doing this. And I see this, for example, in air inspection technology. We have lots and lots of different inspection technologies on the shop floor, depending on the method and the product that we're making. And everybody's going down this path. Also in our vendor base. The problem is when I try to build advanced inspection automation and I have 100 closed systems where everybody's trying to sell me services for automated inspection, I can't build the thread of data and build outcomes wing to wing from a value stream perspective because all the data is locked up now. So, I see everybody's trying to sort of get ahead of that curve and own all the data and own all the services. And on the consumer side, like myself, I see the need to actually take more control of my data, curate my data, and unleash it, unshackle it, if you will, from the proprietary platforms that are popping out, at an ever increasing space. So it's interesting to see, these opposing forces, and the future, I think, has a lot to tell us here in terms of where we'll find the right balance.
Yeah, I think there's a spectrum of business models that are relevant for industrial operators, and vendors need to be flexible. But Magnus, you bring up a good point for a segue. Who owns the data? That's the billion-dollar question here. I'm not even going to put any more context behind it. I'm just curious what you guys have to say about that.
Well, who owns the data today, or who we want to own the data, or who we want to own the data going forward? Those are all valid questions. There is no doubt in my mind that the data should be owned by the manufacturers. Which system you use, no matter which company you prototype with, no matter what's your final decision, you need to figure out the way to use the data. We all heard the data is the new currency and all of that, and that became an overstatement. But if you don't own the data, you won't be able to realize all the scenarios that we talk about the promise of the industry 4.0. You from the very basic ones, from predictive maintenance to your fail rates, to your quality assurance, to anything that you will want to do. If you don't own the data, you will not be able to do that. And even if you say, well, okay, I'm working with a partner, they're going to own the data. Trust me, at one point in time, there will be somebody somewhere who will say, we sell it back to them. And again, in the consumer space, there are so many examples where we are voluntarily giving the data to the big companies, and they are monetizing on that data to sell me back stuff. I mean, that's the way it works in the consumer space. So why do you want to get yourself today, when you have a choice, in that same predicament? I think it's key that we own the data. So no matter which platform you own, no matter how you set up your industrial IoT, no matter how you're going to do that, you need to find a way to bring that data into your environment and then be able to run your analysis and your
Okay. Magnus, what do you think?
There's a new saying out there of data is the new gold. And I think that holds true, in so many ways. Just thinking about a couple examples, we're in, as an example, predictive maintenance scenarios that we're working on, and, classifying machine breakdowns, early detection, prevention, and so on. And all of a sudden you start talking with stakeholders about statistical measurements like accuracy and precision, F1 score, confusion matrices, right? All statistical measures of how is your model performing in a way that ideally should perform better than the E method, which is the human brain. And so now it comes down to discussion about how do you really make business decisions based on how your data is performing what it's telling you. And so that's just one of literally thousands of examples where, again, if you don't really control your data, your machine data, your inspection data, what have you across the supply chain, and really build a culture to make business decisions based on that through automation, again, using now rapidly, say, for example, maturing predictive models and machine learning and so on, you're just not going to make any headway. So to me, taking ownership and controlling your data and feeling like you own it and learning how to make better data-driven decisions from it is actually sort of step one in your journey of being successful in the space of Industry 4.0.
Interesting. Okay, so to just quickly recap that and then move into the last question. Vendors, one piece of advice for you. Anytime an industrial customer asks you who owns the data, the answer is the customer owns the data. Otherwise, the conversation's over. Okay.
But I will say though, there's a lot of ways for vendors to add value there. If you can bring in incredible domain expertise about the method or the process and be a partner and a guide in how you can deliver outcomes from that data, there's a lot of room for you as a vendor. But I will also say that, when you engage in discussions about, well, here's an advanced piece of hardware. Oh, by the way, to get access to the data, well, hey, now we can't really do that. Then, that's a really good way to not being at the table in my world.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to do this last question in about 2 minutes, and then we'll move into Q&A. I'd just love to hear an example of a win rolling out a digital solution within your operations from each of you guys. If maybe you could each give us just a quick example of something exciting you've done recently. Who wants to go first on that one? Goran, I know you got a good one.
Yeah, you want me to go first? Sure. So I have a very, very trying to push the remote assistance using augmented reality into our factories. And I have a team in Barcelona that's been focusing on augmented reality and basically on all immersive experiences. And we've looked in the number of technologies, and I think that we are rather mature in understanding what the opportunity of the space, what we can do, what are the limitations, and so on. We've done at least 5 different POCs in both consumer and enterprise space, and I'm a big believer. I think that technology is coming. So we've done and industrialized and activate some consumer stuff, but from the Industry 4.0 perspective, it was a no-brainer for me that we can do remote assistance into our to tweak and to make it work better. It's been a year since we tried to push that as a solution into the factories, and it was just not happening. There was always other priorities, and I guess at the end of the day, we all like to travel occasionally. So I'm not saying that's the reason, but there is a notion of that as well. So now after a year of trying to deploy that, just last week on Monday, we received a request from the Connected Factory Council saying that we need a solution for remote assistance using AR now. And that was to close the commercial negotiations, package the product, make it available globally for all the factories, and basically deploy it in less than 5 days. And that got all the way to the executive board and response to COVID-19 and making employees safe and basically making our factories run still during that. It was a big shout out to the innovation team, and basically an explanation of why do you need to systematically invest into the new capabilities, into the new technologies, because you never know when you're gonna need them.
Awesome. Very, very cool stuff, Goran. Magnus, one from you, and then we'll switch to Q&A.
So one that's very exciting right now is getting back to this whole data question, inspection data. I think I mentioned, if you go to a factory floor, there is 100 different inspection methods, visual, dimensional, all the way from small gauges to very advanced inspection methodologies like CMM and even a CT scan and X-ray and what have you. And we've been doing a lot of, again, coming back to these little guys, right? Building connectivity, collecting inspection data, curating it, make it readily available for process automation to do more than just process control and statistical process control, but again, building predictive algorithms and really unleashing data across the enterprise, feeding engineering with MPI and so on and so forth. So, building a platform like that, again, democratizes the inspection data, makes it really, readily available for consumption. We're seeing some incredible outcomes in terms of scrap, rework, and also cycle times coming down in particular areas. So, benefits are really being felt, and that we can, trace back to the ledger, which is pretty cool. So there's hope out there. There's a lot more to do, but it's coming.
Awesome. Well, thanks guys for an exciting discussion. I'm opening up the Q&A section here. I can see we've got a bunch of questions that have already rolled in. So let's pick a good one here. Okay, I like this one. From Sam Cates, a friend of mine, formerly from GE Ventures. What is the single biggest obstacle to adopting the current set of new solutions in your operations? Is it security, data ownership, proving ROI? Who wants to jump on that? Single biggest obstacle.
I'll go. These are all great obstacles. It's hard to choose. They're all very formidable, but I will come back to what I said earlier. It's improving the ROI. Again, especially in an old school manufacturing operation, quality, safety, base cost, lead time. These are all the metrics that we live and breathe by. Employee safety, and drawing the link between how the art of the possible now with these rapidly democratizing technologies are, can really help move the needle on these goals, and building the awareness about that, which means failing to prove the ROI, right? That's what it means. That to me is the biggest obstacle. Cyber is a close second, but that's mainly culture, and often we get hung up in cyber issues, and it becomes the objective, not a problem to solve for, but we need to go and secure and then forget about the problem we're trying to go and solve for. So I see a lot of that too, really, cyber and the whole connectivity piece kind of setting our way, but ROI, but to me is the biggest one, and scaling it.
Okay.
I would agree with that. I think that our ROI is the one. The way I usually explain when we talk internally in the company is that, when you try to think about what's digital transformation. So for me, digital transformation is how fast are you going and adopting new technologies and putting them into your corporation. If you're going too slow, you're generating technology debt, and then you're in trouble. If you're going too fast, you're probably overextending and probably taking maybe some unnecessary risk. So you have to find that right speed. And in enterprise, in OT, the biggest issue is the cost of that equipment, the CapEx and the investment that you have to do. So the ROI for me would be that number one thing that determines how fast you want to go to be between the bleeding edge and creating technology debt. So that is the speed of your digital transformation, and that's where you want to go. And that's where I say, well, when we compare ourselves with some of our factories that are 10, 20, 30, 40 years old, compared to a new company that is digitally native that's being created, well, they're state of the art today, but in 5 years' time, they're going to have exactly the same reflection as we are having, So you have to find that speed where you balance between how much money you're investing and not to be out and get into the technology debt. And that's your speed, and that's your return of investment. That's your only measure. I think that security and data ownership, all of that you can negotiate, fix, improve, so on and so on. But ROI is your number one decision where you're gonna go.
Okay, I like that. There's a lot of good questions in here right now. I'm going to combine two of them because I think they're along the same thread. Combining two questions, one from Jamil at Strauss Group, one from Matteo at Bosch. How do you deal with change management within the organization? That's obviously a big inhibitor to a lot of the progress here. And how do you fix the skills gap? So I guess those are sort of related questions. So addressing change management and the skills gap as you bring digital technologies into, not digitally native environments. Go.
Goodness. On the change management piece, again, you could probably write a whole book on that. I'm sure lots of books I've written on that too, but I will kind of sort of give the one thing that I tend to focus on that I find successful. And that is, we tend to, it's about really figuring out who it is that you serve. Who are you trying to give a better day? And to me, that's always the operator, right? If you take all that noise out and everybody who wants big KPI improvements, and you got different functions, who have all their respective, targets and goals and so on. But if you sort of ignore all that and say, Tom, Joe, Bobby, and Mary over here who come at 8 or come at 7 to work, leave at 4, and all I want to do is do the job well. If you really focus on how can you give them a better day, give them the tools that they need to have, again, just a better day. I know it sounds kind of high level, but that's really that basic. You start seeing a lot of engagement and ownership and it's, skin in the game, if you will, that, if I participate in this change, I'm gonna have a better day. So every time when we get too many stakeholders and too many wishes and wants in these projects, I always try to sort of filter that out and just say I'm serving the operator, I'm giving you a better day, and when I do, I typically find the most success.
I totally agree. I can only say that in other words, we are deciding how to do digital transformation from top down, but the change management is happening bottom up. And as long as you are making sure that your operators are happy and you manage to show the proper angle from that perspective, it works well. And any issue that I have had in the past was when we failed to do that properly, and you would have factory managers and factory floor managers who didn't understand the value of what you're bringing them and how you're making their life easier. So as long as you're not seeing a threat, I haven't had a lot of issues. And times are changing. I mean, people are slowly realizing that it's happening. You say, Isaac, it's been 10 years, but it's I still think it's getting better. So.
We all hope.
And on the skills piece, that was kind of the second question. I take a lot of cues from lean here. The way you do lean, you don't do lean in a conference room, you do lean hands-on, right? On the shop floor, and you apply principles like tri-storming, right? But key with lean is that you use your hands, right? Use your hands to go and do on the shop floor. That is kind of how I think about a lot of these things. If you can take a lot of training, you can go to a lot of conferences, you can read a lot of books, you can do a lot of things, but you really learn by doing, right? That's kind of a golden rule in lean, and that to me, when it comes to operations technology and this kind of stuff, you need to go and learn how to, again, write, I don't know, 20, 30 lines of C+ code, right, to acquire and do some edge processing of some basic sensor data, push it to the cloud, and build some basic visualization. Once you learn how to go do that, it's not so scary anymore, right? And then you start doing more and more things. So, to me, when teams come to me and say, hey, we have a new problem, we need a contractor or a consultant, I said, no, you don't. You need to go and learn and do. It's hard. Sometimes people think you're evil, but they always come back and say, that was awesome. I learned something, I contributed to an outcome, I feel great. So it's really about, again, holding people accountable for learning and for doing it hands-on. Don't sit in a conference room. It's not working.
Awesome. Goran, final thoughts, and then we're going to wrap.
No, I have nothing to add. I believe that people do want to learn, and I fully agree with Magnus. I mean, if you give them an opportunity, and we've always known that from change management perspective, as long as they feel they're contributing, I think that people do want to learn, and I haven't had any issues with that. So I totally agree.
Okay, great. Well, we're at time. I want to let everybody get on with their day. So Goran, Magnus, thank you guys so much for joining today. It's always a pleasure working with you. To everybody who tuned in today, I hope that you and your families and your businesses are all safe. Thanks, as always. Have a good day.